Welcome back, APUSH students. Today is chapter 39 of the American Pageant, titled The Resurgence of Conservatism. If you don't know the American Pageant, it's fine because the content is still going to be the same. I'm going to be going over all the key terms and notes for this chapter that helped me get a 5, so I encourage you to take notes along as well. It's Morning in America, Ronald Reagan's campaign slogan. It was meant to symbolize how it was a new day in America, explaining how new ways of political thinking were emerging to fix much of what went wrong in the 60s and 70s. American society was beginning to face new influence from cultural conservatives and anti-governmental power advocates. So the slogan kind of fit the theme of the period where there's a lot of distrust in government, a lot of no confidence kind of measures in government, and saying it's a new day, it's a new time to be in government was good for kind of counteracting that bad mood towards the establishment. New right, new Republican cause. The new wave of Republicans focused more on cultural issues like feminist issues and sexual issues, taking traditionalist views on most matters. These Republicans spoke louder about pressing cultural issues than older conservatives. This is where the idea of fighting the culture war kind of came out of with the Republican Party. Ronald Reagan, conservative president of the 80s. He was a leader of the New Right movement by taking politically, socially, and governmentally conservative views. He lifted the voices of the American people who felt they had been victimized by the failing big government agenda. Ronald Reagan became a legend in Republican history and the Republican Party. Proposition 13, large tax cuts. It originated in California as a protest against property taxes to limit the government's ability to spend on welfare programs. This anti-tax advocacy helped get Reagan into power, which he followed through with his policies. Boll weevils, more conservative traditional Democrats. Reagan worked hard to appeal to this group, which provided an extra layer of support for the already popular president. This helped expand Reagan's influence in Congress beyond the already Republican majority. You can view this as reaching across the aisle, but you can also view this as just Democrats were being pretty conservative, or some Democrats being pretty conservative. So is it really reaching across the aisle when they think kind of the same as you? I don't know, but it was definitely expanding beyond just the Republican Party. Supply side economics, idea that less spending would encourage more growth. Although at first it seemed like a failing conservative dream, the economy picked up a few years into Reagan's presidency and led to decades of continued growth. Despite this, Reagan failed to cut government spending altogether, as military spending and massive government borrowing stayed in place. So this idea was that if the government cut regulations and cut the amount of pumping money onto the consumer side of the economy, that the economy would grow, because if you keep more money in the hands of investors and businesses, that the success would trickle down to lower prices, and economic success would trickle down to everybody, not just wealthy business owners. And it worked in some areas, but in terms of cutting government regulations and cutting government spending, it didn't work completely because the government still had a massive budget, and it actually ballooned during Reagan's presidency. So not the full aspect of the supply side theory came to fruition. Strategic Defense Initiative, missile defense system known as Star Wars. A call for American military presence in space that protected the U.S. against intercontinental strikes. This was part of Reagan's plan to blow out the arms race in hopes that American exceptionalism will carry themselves over the Kremlin to pursue eventual peace. Solidarity, labor union that opposed Soviet Polish government. The Soviet Union responded to the labor threats by imposing martial law that violated the human rights of citizens. This caused Reagan to respond with sanctions that further declined the reinvigorated Cold War tensions that came with Reagan. Sandinistas/Contras, revolutionaries in Nicaragua/counter-revolutionaries. Reagan came out against the anti-American Sandinistas and supported the counter-revolutionary Contras, using Cold War justifications to do so. This is kind of a proxy war, proxy conflict type thing. This was an example of neoconservative nationalist interventionism that Reagan pursued in his foreign policy. So old conservatives wouldn't be interventionists like this, get involved in foreign affairs, but the new conservative movement believes that American ideals can be advanced in global spheres. Glasnost/Perestroika, more open policies pursued by Gorbachev. These policies are revolutionary from a Soviet perspective, as they provided for an opening up of civil liberties and an opening up of the market to promote both social and economic prosperity. This shift could be used as evidence that Reagan's goals were being achieved. INF Treaty, banning intermediate missiles from Europe. It served as both a symbolic end to the arms race, but also a symbolic end to the Cold War. In the finale of 4 summits, Reagan displayed his achievements by broadcasting a friendly meeting with Gorbachev. This historical show of peace cemented Reagan and Gorbachev in history. Iran-Contra affair, secret U.S. dealings with Iran and the Contras. The Reagan administration violated congressional authority by undergoing unauthorized deals with Iran, who funneled money to the Contras. This scandal ran counter to Reagan's numerous foreign policy successes and created a blemish on his administration. A little nuance with this conflict, or the scandal, I guess, is that it wasn't proven that Reagan was the one who ordered this, or that Reagan knew directly what was going on, but more that it was his cabinet and some members of his administration and some members of the bureaucracy that were really taking the lead on this sort of undisclosed foreign policy intervention from the Reagan administration. Moral majority, conservative religious political group. The conservative religious population declared that moral and personal issues were of intense political importance. Movements like the pro-life movement put on display the new form of conservative activism that mirrored leftist movements decades before. Identity politics, politics that played toward certain groups. It was a type of campaigning and politicking that both the left and the right used to garner support of racial, sexual, or religious groups. This type of politics is often divisive and has inflammatory rhetoric. The term identity politics is definitely more of a buzzword on the right than it is on the left, but both sides definitely do this to some degree, and both sides make people victims of the targeting, people's identity rather than their morals and their actual political views. AIDS activism, gay rights activism in support of AIDS victims. Since AIDS spread predominantly to homosexual people, the terrifying epidemic provided activists with an opportunity to preach for gay rights. Starting with the healthcare system, activists advocated for a greater government response to the crisis, inflicting harm on the gay population. Black Monday, stock market crash. It symbolized the uncertain economic times as the market crashed due to economic fears. Many thought it was a sign that money culture was coming to an end, but in reality it had no effect on economic motivations. George H.W. Bush, Republican president nominee and Reagan vice president. He won the presidency and ran on a mostly Reagan-like set of policies. His quest for continuing the communist collapse was made easier by democratic demonstrations in communist blocs like China and Soviet puppet states. The Berlin Wall's collapse symbolized the end of the Cold War. Operation Desert Storm, American intervention in the war in Kuwait. This is more American interventionism right here. It was a successful response to Iraq's invasion that took only 4 days to complete and showed the power of America's military force. Unfortunately, Saddam Hussein remained in power and the tense conflicts in the Middle East continued on. Americans with Disabilities Act prohibited ableist discrimination. It not only helped to protect citizens with physical disabilities, it provided more help to the mentally ill who had been historically left behind. It helped to uplift Bush's image and his quest for a kinder, gentler America. And that's a wrap. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next chapter, and goodbye.